All right, we are here with Carlos Diaz, referee and judge for ADCC. We just got done with the ADCC World Championships this last weekend in Las Vegas. It was a phenomenal event. I thought I'd talk with Carlos about some of the action that happened at ADCC, as well as actually get Carlos on to answer a few questions that I've seen pop up online and in person over the last week as everyone sort of digested ADCC. Carlos, I want to get it from you. First of all, how you doing? And thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today.
My pleasure, man. Yes, and I'm doing great. I'm in Chicago right now, up for a different event, and yeah, man. Let's get right to the nitty gritty, to the action and lack thereof action.
Yeah. So hey, you said it, lack thereof. So I've seen online a lot of stuff this week. First of all, I loved the event. I think it's definitely the greatest grappling event we've ever seen. It was phenomenal. And I have so many good things to say about it. There is a bit of controversy from people that I don't think are as familiar with the rule set for ADCC because it's different than a lot of rule sets that we typically see throughout the year. There were some stalling calls and some warnings for activity in a couple of the finals matches that I would love to talk to you about. There's a couple of them in the Kaynan Duarte versus Craig Jones match, and there was one of them in the Superfight for Gordon Ryan versus André Galvão. Is there one of them that you would like to talk about first and sort of explain to the folks exactly what was happening there and why someone would get a penalty or why there would be a call for action in Gordon Ryan's case on the back of André Galvão?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm trying to remember. I'm very aware with the one of Craig Jones and Kaynan because that was actually on my mat. I was also one of the judges for obviously the Gordon and André. But I think it was an action call. There was not an actual penalty.
Yeah, that's correct. It was only a call for action.
So either one, whatever you want. Let's go.
Let's start with the Gordon one because I think that's the one that people don't understand the most. Although Gordon didn't get a penalty, he was on Andre's back. He had received some points. He was controlling Galvão, and he was kind of trapping the hand. And at a certain point, the referee leant down and kind of gave Gordon a continue moving forward, an action call that I think, especially in the arena and online, people didn't quite understand why, when Gordon in dominant position, would have gotten that call. Can you explain sort of ADCC's action calls, how they're different from penalties, and why an athlete would get an action call in that position?
So let's regress a little bit and let's talk about some of the formalities that we use during ADCC. They are calls for action, which is not a warning, which is not a penalty. It is just an incentive or a warning, if you might want to put it that way, towards the athletes. So they continue the action. So they just don't sit in the back and just stay there or get on the mount position and just stay there. We are pushing for the finish. We want to see continuous activity. And that's what the call for action is. So we'll communicate to the mat referee and let them know. It's like, hey, give them a call for action. Let's get the action moving. Because if you can dominate someone and have their back, so the next progression to that should be looking for a finish, right? And that's what we are pushing for. So that's it. Gordon is extremely smart when it comes to the point system and how to utilize the point system to his advantage. So we know that we can see more from him, and that's what we were looking. And you know what? Guess what? We did the call for action, and what did Gordon do? He went ahead and readjusted the back take to trap Andre's hand with the body lock triangle. So guess what? It worked. And then from that point, he continued to start searching for his submission. So that's all. That's what the call for action is. It's not a negative. It's not a warning. It's just an incentive to let the guys know, don't stay stuck in that position and move forward.
Yeah, and again, reading, and I've done a couple of the referee seminars with you and with Mo and with Peter over the last year or so, and that's communicated in the referee seminar. And I think that if people are curious about that and want to learn more about ADCC, you guys offer those seminars in certain trials locations, and I always encourage people on the show, if they are interested in understanding better, to take one of those and to learn that, because in on the mat, seeing that, I went, yeah, that's it's not a warning, it's not a penalty, it's simply a call for action in dominant position, because ADCC, kind of unlike other organizations, will not allow you to just take dominant position and simply maintain. You're supposed to be continually progressing towards either additional points, additional scoring, additional position, or a finish. And so that kind of moves into the Kaynan versus Craig Jones match. There were, I think, in that match, 8 penalties assessed to Kaynan Duarte. I think he won that match 10-0 with 10 or 11-0 with 8 penalties, so up 2-0 on Craig Jones. In that match, I think people can understand the first couple of penalties that he received. I think people were unfamiliar with people receiving penalties from dominant position. We sort of talked of that in the previous discussion of the Gordon Ryan match. In the rules, ADCC tends to get more, or my understanding is that there's more quickly assigned penalties for inactivity later in the match if an athlete is up on points or in dominant position. Can you explain, for that match in particular, some of the criteria and some of the thought process that goes in with how the rules are enforced on the mat, and why Kaynan received all of those penalties throughout the match?
Well, there's a couple of things that occurred during that match. Obviously, Kaynan achieved dominant position, guard passes, and mount positions on Craig Jones. And he did it several times fairly easy. Obviously, yes, it is Craig Jones, it is Kaynan Duarte. It's not easy by any means, and that's not what I'm trying to say, that, anybody can pass Craig Jones guard or maintain mount position. But for Kaynan Duarte, he achieved certain positions very easily. And it was very clear that he was very content with just maintaining a points lead. And just like we said before, so the athletes get 2 warnings. They can get a million action calls because, again, an action call has no effect to the points, okay, or the warnings, or any of that matter. An action call is just a psychological push for the athletes to continue to move. Now, he received 2 warnings. After 2 warnings, their own forward is just negative ones till infinity, okay? And that's what occurred with Kaynan Duarte. He would sit in positions with zero visual desire to improve or to try to finish the match. There was a time with, I discussed with the other judge, George, and I said, he purposely went back to half guard to pass Craig's guard again. And it was very clear that he did it. He literally shot his foot back, was able to just get the foot to the calf area in, and waited, about a 6-7 second count, and was easily able to cut knee and pass once again. So he accumulated certain points, and he was very content. And he was very well aware, because one of the things that we do, we make sure that he knows that he has at least his first negative point, because from their own forward, it's just negatives if you don't move. So not only he knows, but we also make it very clear to his corner. And we made it very clear every time he received a negative, we made it very clear to his corner, if he continues to be so passive during the match, every 20-25 seconds approximately, we're going to ding him up with a negative. And that's what occurred. And, he was able to climb up the score high enough that he was content winning by a small margin of points, knowing that Craig is a very dangerous athlete. And even after the match, when the guys come back and talk to their corners, he even said to his corner, he's like, I did not want to engage more than I had to, and I was, he said it in Portuguese to his corner, and I was able to hear it. In the same token, I was also able to hear Craig said, Jesus, he's so strong, I couldn't shake him off. So, you know, we haven't. I mean, we know these guys. Obviously, perhaps not in a personal level, but we know their style and their game. You know, they are frequent competitors. They're notorious, and then they're well-known athletes. And you know, all of us, the judges. One of the things, and I will speak for myself. I know some of the other judges do it as well. Is we study a lot of the athletes' matches, so we are educated on what they tend to do for situations like this. Because simply with something as simple as just telling them, you know, a call for action, we know that will click something in their brain. It's like, okay, they are about to hit me up with either a warning or a negative. Let me get the ball moving and achieve something.
Yeah.
But that was the situation with Kaynan. He was content, and you know, again, we warned him. He had his warnings, and he was content with that. He was able to rack up enough points to the point that he didn't care to continue to get negative points for not improving his position. And that's the goal in ADCC. We are looking for the athletes to continuously improve, even if you're in a dominant position. So if you're in a dominant position, what's the next step? You should be searching a submission. But Kaynan wasn't doing that. He was just maintaining mount position or maintaining side control.
So
I
actually really appreciate the ADCC rule set for really allowing athletes to play it and, you know, and sort of game it in the way that they see fit. You know, it's in other organizations, it's very frequent. You know, you have a couple of negatives you can receive before you're disqualified. I appreciate that ADCC allows the athlete to continue to work or move through the match in the way that they choose to play it. You know, with the -1 in the finals for the guard pull, it's not banned. It's allowed for athletes to do it. They're just assessed the negative. And ADCC gives the athletes, I think, a greater degree of freedom to work within the rule sets how they see fit. And I appreciated, even in Kaynan's post-fight interview, he said, you know, he probably lost 75% of the crowd there for that match for, you know, the inactivity and some of the passiveness. And he said, hey, I have a career here. I need to win by, you know, what is required and what is needed. Craig is so dangerous. And I think a lot of folks in the arena especially came through and they appreciated that, yeah, you know, Craig Jones is very dangerous. This is playing within the scope of the rules, and this is one way that you can go and get a victory in the rule set. But unless you've been through one of the ADCC rules meetings, that 20 to 30 second or so call for action and penalization, you're not very familiar with seeing that in other rule sets. And ADCC, I think you and Mo both have said it in the rule sets, you know, you can get an unlimited number of penalties. And, you know, we saw someone rack up a huge amount of penalties with a dominant position. And I just think that a lot of the community wasn't as familiar with seeing that. But I really appreciate that ADCC allows athletes to play it how they see fit. And Kaynan, you know, at certain points was forced to continue to score more points when he gamed and the negatives got close to his point total and evened up the match. So I wanted you to clear that up.
And he knew it. He was, you know, like you said, and now that you mention it, I do recollect that in an interview, he did mention that. He says, like, listen, my job is to win.
Yeah.
You know, within the rule set. And that's what he did.
Yeah.
You know,
he's now a two-time champion understanding the rule set.
Yeah, and it's also weird because, again, as a fan, we want to see, you know, we wish that everyone was, you know, Mika Galvão or Kay Rotolo or Fabricio Andre. You know, we wish that everyone was that active, right? But that's not the case, you know, and, you know, we understand that, listen, especially in ADCC, a win can make or break your career.
Yeah.
You know, and it's funny because I don't think, and it's a joke, and everybody jokes about it. I don't think a second place to Craig Jones hurt his career. You know, jokingly and candidly as possibly can, and I know it's a little sting in the heart for him, but I call him the King of Silver. You know, because he's the king of silver.
3 times in a row, you can't argue with consistency. You know, I don't know. There are not that many athletes returning medalists every year. I think this year we did some calculations on the show, and I think this is one of the few. I maybe speak out of turn here, but this may be the fewest number of returning medalists that we have seen in many years.
I don't know if it's the fewest number of medalists. I personally have not done those numbers, but I will know out of the top of my head, it is the fewest returning champions.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, that ADCC has ever had. We did not have a returning champion for 66.
No.
The
77 was JT.
The 77 we had JT. 88 we had Mateos. Under 99.
Kaynan. No, Kaynan was over 99. Sorry, Gordon last time.
So Kaynan moved. Moved weight classes, and Gordon also moved weight classes. Yeah. So
for the men's divisions and for the women's divisions, we did have we had Gabby returning and we had Bia returning.
And Bia returning as a female champ, and and I think this year more than any time, and one of the judges, we both mentioned it. It's like it's good to see new blood come in.
Yeah,
and not only new blood come in, but new blood come in and do so well, because all that means is that the scales are starting to balance worldwide. You see, I know there was some discussion in the past that, Brazil is a little bit behind the curve on the leg lock game. But I also saw a lot of Brazilians win by leg locks.
Yeah.
Then, the guys, the European guys, you had, God, what is his name? Flanagan,
and Sam. So Flanagan and Sam both did very well.
Impressed me. They both impressed me greatly. Fionn coming in as
a Welsh champion,
and I wouldn't say as an underdog, but definitely she was not the favorite.
No,
in the numbers, and becoming a champion. So it was very impressive to see again the new blood and do so well at the worldwide stage, and it's refreshing. It's good to see. It just opens so many things to new possibilities. So I'm excited to see what the future holds. That's for sure.
Speaking of the future, I'm not sure what you can speak about or what you can't speak about. There are at the Thomas and Mack Arena. During the week, there was an ADCC Open. I know you ran one earlier this year, I think down in Florida. Is that correct?
I ran one in Florida. Actually, not this year. It actually was back in, I want to say 2017, 2018.
Okay, 2017, 2018. I got my years mixed up, but there are now rumors that there are more, and I think I've seen a couple calendar listings of additional ADCC Opens throughout the United States and, in other places. It's typically been something we only see over in European countries, but I think, can you speak to some of the renewed interest in getting more of those Opens over to the U.S., or speak to any of the plans for how many of them there may be, or where, or when? Yeah. I think there's rumor of one in November in Denver coming up.
So an actual date, I don't have. I don't know of any set schedule. Okay. However, yes, Europe has always been in the forefront with the ADCC Opens. They have them up there regularly. They have a much bigger refereeing staff. So our team in Europe, Marco Lidston and those guys, they're doing a phenomenal job in Europe. And I know they have another upcoming event to close the year in Poland. And they expect a big turnout. But what I do know for the U.S., I know Mo Jassim and the team, they have a very, the proper word I want to use, ambitious upcoming schedule. I am not 100% sure if any of them will happen before the end of the year. I know that there are some talks that, they would like to do at least one before the end of the year. But again, I don't have any schedule. as of yet. I'm pretty sure that as soon as that's laid out, they will let me know so I can adjust my schedule accordingly and help out with the refereeing and the judging. And we have a good skeleton crew of people that are knowledgeable enough at this point that we can start creating and what's the word that I want to use? Train properly and building up a good proper. No, not as much the refereeing, because the refereeing it is a little bit easier, but the judging.
Yeah.
Knowing those criteria.
Being a judge for the Open on the week of ADCC was really eye-opening. The ADCC staff was nice enough to put me with some of the very, very experienced judges, and I got to be a judge for the ADCC Open. I think I've taken the referee course 3 separate times. I got my Class C certification during East Coast trials. But that was a great opportunity for me to come in, under people that were very experienced and judge a huge number of matches, beginning with the kids matches all the way through the adult matches into the pro matches, and really see how that rule set and really study that rule set.
What about those kids? What about the kids?
That was phenomenal.
Savages. I'm gonna tell you, the whole week, that is the one thing that I was most impressed with. Sorry, that car go by.
Audio texture.
So I saw some kids. There was one kid. Oh man, I forget what academy he was from. I think he was from Arizona, from 5'5", from Casino's academy. That he was like the miniature Andrew Varela, and I said it's like that's little baby Andrew Varela, because he had the little mullet cut and. He was doing the jumping guillotine chokes and cartwheel passes, and I was like, "What? What is this? This is a straight up savage." I mean, geez.
Yeah, I was very, very impressed with the kids divisions that I watched.
The technical proficiency of this, and I don't think this kid was even 13 years old yet, but the technical proficiency of these kids at this age. And these kids are going to be absolute monsters in the next 10 years.
And that's why I'm really excited to see, and here I've been speaking to you and Mo and some of the other folks, they're going to get more ADCC Opens in the United States, because I think, previously we had, your event a couple of years ago, and then the trials were really, if you wanted an introduction to that rule set, very few organizations were using it. And I think, at least I'm forecasting that will change. I think that there should be kind of a larger adoption of the ADCC rule set across a larger scope of tournament promoters, and then in ADCC kind of coming into the United States, what they're doing in Europe over here with more tournaments on the local and regional side to give the athletes that are coming up and the children and the teens an opportunity to actually compete in that rule set with referees and judges. And understand, because the way that we did the Open was the way that the World Championships was done, with just a few less folks on the table, really. And so that experience and having an experience to do that and watching those athletes compete, there were definitely a couple of matches where you had an athlete or a corner that was used to a different rule set and either received negatives or penalties or didn't receive stack points or things that they weren't used to. And I think that if we saw more events, that would be severely diminished, and you'd have athletes and coaches and parents better understanding 100%. The criterias.
100%. And I remember during the Open, there was a student of a very well-known jiu-jitsu athlete, and his student made a strategical and a technical mistake where he received a negative for guard pulling, and it met the criteria to receive the negative, and then he would come up on a knee.
Yeah.
And then sit back to guard. And he didn't understand that being on a knee, it's not being standing up. Being on a knee is just like being on the guard position.
Right.
So you're going to get dinged up for that. And, you know, and his coach was furious, and I'm trying to explain it to him, and they refused to listen to the explanation. And I'm like, listen, there's a rules meeting tomorrow. You're welcome to discuss it there. If you're not going to give me the time to explain it to you now, and, you know, while he's still screaming, it's like, okay, there's more matches. I got more work to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into a battle with you.
Yeah.
Funny thing is, one of the things that we specifically discussed during the rules meeting was that position being on the knee. And he was there, and I gave him a look, and he gave me like a look like, okay, you got me. And I was like,
but yeah,
now you understand it.
And that's the education.
And I went to him and I said, like, listen, I'm not trying to be difficult, and I'm completely unbiased. I genuinely don't care who wins or who loses. I care that the judging, it's fair across the board. I genuinely can say I have zero favoritism. Like, I like André Galvão. I like Gordon Ryan. You know, I just wanted to see a good match, you know? And, you know, it is what it is, man.
It
you
is.
know?
I
just
very
carry
pleased.
the rules across the board.
I was very pleased, you know, when I was judging for the Open. There were only a couple instances where people were upset with misunderstandings of the rules.
It's usually that's the case.
People it was nice. Generally, everyone was fairly educated. I was actually very surprised. I think on our mat, we had I think we did about 150 matches. And I think we had less than 8 of them that went to decision. I think we only had 4 or 5 of them over that entire 150 that ended up needing to go to a referee's decision after the overtime that were either tied on points or negatives. And I really appreciated that rule set because I think that is unique from what I've seen versus other rule sets, is there tends to be a lot more need for decision. Something about that ADCC rule set, or the people that were particularly at the Open in Las Vegas, I found it very interesting that there needed to be that few decisions, and most of those came in the pro level at the end of the day, where athletes were very, very familiar with exactly what they needed to do and exactly how they needed to play it. And I just really appreciate that. Like, I personally very much enjoy the ADCC rule set. I like how it prioritizes things. And again, I appreciate, you know, personally you for all of the messages that I have sent you over the years about questions for the rule set and all the matches that you have pointed to me over the years. Hey, Maine, go watch this match, score this match, and tell me, you know, if you have questions.
I have a new match for you to watch and study.
What's your new match, Carlos?
Tyro Tolo versus Nicolas Maragali.
Okay. See, I was unfortunate. I was in front of the mat 1, and that was taking place on mat 3, so I had to turn my head.
Oh yeah, you were in the
Yeah, I was in the second day. I was in that corner there, like 4 rows back. It was I enjoyed it.
And I tell you what, and this is part of me. This is what, you know, one of the things where I say I don't care who wins or loses. I genuinely don't. I just want to carry the rules fairly across the board.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens is, as a fan, you can get emotional about a match and make a poor judgment, an unfair judgment, as a fan, you know, just because, you know, who's more exciting perhaps, or, you know, it's like, I know this person a little bit better than I know this other person, or, you know, or this guy is the underdog. Like, for example, Ty and Nicholas, you know, Ty is smaller, so, you know, people want to see the small guy beat the bigger guy, right? So I can see where, you know, a lot of people starting to, you know, when we make the decision, because the score was 0-0, the overtime was 0-0, you know, and we made the decision. Nicolas Maragali was more active, did more,
And I thought that as well, watching it from afar, and it was one of the matches that I was going to go back and honestly probably going to send you a message about and go, Carlos, this is what I think. Am I correct in my understanding of the rules and what met the judging criteria?
And one of the things that I personally do, because even, when the match comes to the end, it is a decision among the table judges and the floor referee. So we call the floor referee, Miguel, up to the table. And, I forgot. I had one of the Finn guys to my left. I had George, one of the head judges from Bulgaria, to my right. And the three of us agreed the Marigali had won, where the referee on the mat, favored tie. But he's also seeing it from a different perspective. He's seeing it as he has to pay attention to a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I personally do, I actually have always some scrap paper, and I make notes on when a major activity during the match happens within the ADCC criteria. Is it a proper takedown attempt? Is it a near back control? So when situations like that is a close match and the score ends up actually being 0-0, I can make a solid and unbiased decision of who was more properly acted than the other person.
I think that was one of the best pieces of advice you and actually J-Reg Labuto gave me when I was preparing to be a judge for the Open, was to keep a piece of scrap paper, keep a piece of paper in front of you, and for every single match that took place over the day of me judging, I had red corner, blue corner, and who was the more aggressive and active person within the criteria of the rule set. And there were a couple of times where that made the decision very easy at the end, because I could look at my notes and go, yep, they are, this person has 7 times that they have done something that would be considered scoring criteria for judging in the rule set. The other person has 4. I will give it to the person that has had 7 attempts if all attempts are equal. And it made that was a very good piece of advice that you and Jay both gave me. And I appreciated having that in front of me and having done that as an exercise throughout the day, because it did help out.
Absolutely.
Being able to make a fair and unbiased decision.
It takes the memory aspect away from it, because now you don't have to remember everything that happened, because remember, when it's a 0-0 score, we take the whole match into consideration. Not just the overtime. We take the first part of the match and the overtime into consideration, and we judge everything into that criteria. And again, it takes some of that thinking process a little bit out of it, because it's on black and white. The other thing is, just like you said, I put red and blue corner. I don't put their names. I want to take that individual and personal factor away from it. So for me, it's red guy versus blue guy. That's it. And then they decide, depending on the actions that they take on the mat, what the outcome is going to be. So, and again, everybody has their little things to do, but that's one of the perspectives that, from my particular point.
So I only have a couple more minutes before I've actually got to go and teach my classes, and I know you've got to get back to setup for your event. Do you have any sort of closing thoughts overall for ADCC 22, just in general?
Listen, I knew I had seen some of the mock of the production. I knew some of the things that were going to happen. I was extremely impressed, because there's one thing about seeing it on paper and then feeling the crowd, feeling that energy of being there live and actually experiencing that. The people that were not able to make it or chose not to make it, I mean, you can tell them they missed out on an incredible opportunity. And actually, I had a friend of mine that watched it on Flow, and he said to me, he was reminiscing of the Pride Fighting Championships day. And I said, that was the idea. Thank you.
And that's what it felt like.
it was amazing. You know, I know that there were some things and some adjustments that could have been made to run things a little bit better, a little bit quicker. But you know, you're talking about multi-million-dollar production. You're talking about an extreme amount of moving parts. You're talking about dealing with athletes that want to run on their own time.
Yeah,
You
98
know,
independent athletes in a big
right?
way that very much are used to being the top dog and gonna do
Yeah.
things kind of at the speed that they want to. I think
And
that delayed us both
it's
mornings.
funny. One of the things that when we're doing the weigh-ins, I, I I was probably going at night, almost every day there, probably around midnight to 1 o'clock, and I was up every morning at 4:30 to make sure that the guys have ample time to weigh in. And it was a joke that Mo and I had during the weigh-ins. Mo would tell him, he's like, "Oh, make sure to be at the venue at 10 o'clock." And I said, "Nope, be there at 9:30." Just because it just happens.
Yeah.
But looking at the big picture, I thought it was a phenomenal weekend. I thought that the whole team, the fight to win team with Seth, the 5 grappling team with Sean Fowler, obviously, Renato and his team with Browse and the graphics and the gear. It was phenomenal. It really, really, really was fantastic. I really find it challenging to see somebody be able to surpass the production quality. Can it be done? Sure, because everything can be tweaked and better little by little bit every year. But I'm already excited for the upcoming trials. I had a conversation with Mo Jassim, and I said, "Man, listen, we need, if we had over 1,000 people at the West Coast trials at the last one, we can pretty be sure that we're going to have over 1,000 people at the East Coast trials,
Yeah.
and perhaps nearly 2,000 at the West Coast. We'll probably hit over 600 to 800 participants in the South American trials. So because people are getting accustomed to the style, to the rules. They're learning how to be more strategic with the rule set. And, and again, these teams coming up are just absolute savages. They're going to see that they have an opportunity to make it, and the sport is just going to continue to grow. I think this was a big wake-up call. I've even seen messages from people that were very anti-ADCC, send messages to Mo. Some people have sent messages to myself as well, saying it's like, "Wow, you guys killed it," and that's our intent for every single event. We want to cater to everybody. We want to cater to the athletes. We want to cater to the coaches. We want to cater to the fans watching as well. And we want to have, we want everyone to have a good and awesome experience.
Yeah. I really
regardless
think you all nailed it.
if you're wrecked, your body's hurt, yeah, but it's ADCC. It's a little different, so.
But, well, Carlos, I really appreciate the insight as always. I appreciate the interview. I love having you on. I love kind of the insight that you bring for the sport and for ADCC. And I cannot wait to speak to you again. Thank you very much for your time, and I will speak to you soon.
My pleasure. You guys have a great day, and good to talk to you, brother.
Thank you very much.